I thought I was in control. One coffee, 1 hour, easy exit. I stood up to leave, and the world didn't stop. But my chest did, because in the calmest voice, he said my name. And then he said something I hadn't done in years. He named the way I run. And suddenly, everything went quiet. I told myself I wasn't going to care this time. That was the whole point of a blind date, wasn't it? Two strangers. One quiet hour. No history. No expectations. Just a simple test of whether life still had room for surprise. Still, I arrived 10 minutes early. The cafe was warm and softly lit. The kind of place that tried to make everyone look kinder than they felt. Small wooden tables. A faint smell of cinnamon. Quiet music drifting above the low hum of conversation. Outside, rain tapped lightly against the front window, blurring the streetlights into soft, melting gold. I chose a table by the window, not because it was romantic, but because it was neutral. If the date went badly, I could look outside and pretend I was simply watching the world go by. If it went well, I didn't even want to imagine that part yet. My phone buzzed once in my coat pocket. A message from my friend Jenna, the one who'd insisted I stop hiding in my apartment like a wounded animal. Jenna, please just try. 1 hour. If he's awful, I'll buy you dessert tomorrow. I stared at the screen, then locked it without replying. Jenna meant well, but she didn't understand that for me, it wasn't about meeting the right person. It was about not letting someone see how tired I was of hoping. I ordered a black coffee I didn't really want and wrapped my hands around the cup. The warmth helped, but only a little. What I really needed was something harder to find: control. The kind you build when life teaches you that wanting things can be dangerous. His name was Ethan. That was all I knew. A single photo on the app, nothing flashy. No staged vacation shot. No overly polished smile. Just a normal face, dark hair, steady eyes, and a quiet expression that didn't try too hard. That should have been a good sign. But part of me didn't trust good signs anymore. I glanced at the door again. The cafe clock above the counter moved with painful slowness. Every minute felt louder than the one before it. At exactly 7:07, the door opened and a gust of damp air slipped inside. He stepped in, paused briefly, and scanned the room. Not nervously. Not like someone hunting for validation. More like someone trying to respect the space he was entering. Then his eyes found mine, and for a second, something in my chest tightened. An old reflex. Not attraction, not excitement, just that familiar warning. Be careful. He walked over at an even pace. Not rushing, not performing. He wore a dark jacket, simple and clean, and his hair was slightly damp from the rain. No expensive watch. No loud cologne clouding the air. Nothing about him screamed, impressed me. He stopped at my table. Mia, he asked. I nodded once. Ethan. He gave a small smile, polite, restrained, and held out his hand. I hesitated a fraction too long before taking it. His handshake was warm, firm but not aggressive. The kind that didn't demand anything. The kind that could make you feel safe if you let it. I didn't let it. Thanks for meeting, he said as he sat down. Sure. My voice came out flatter than I meant it to. He glanced at the empty chair beside me, then at the window. This place is nice. It's fine, I said. Not rude, just clipped, efficient, like I was already halfway out the door. He didn't react. He simply nodded, as if my tone didn't bother him. That annoyed me more than it should have. Most men on blind dates tried too hard. They filled every silence with jokes. They leaned forward like closeness could be forced. They searched your face for approval, like they were being graded. Ethan didn't do any of that. He sat back comfortably, hands resting on the table, and looked at me with calm attention, as if he wasn't trying to win. I felt my grip tighten around my cup. So, he said gently, how was your day? The question was simple, normal, and still, my first instinct was to protect myself from it. Long, I answered. Work. He nodded again, letting the word hang without pushing. What do you do? I took a small sip of coffee to buy time. Marketing. Do you like it? I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was such an ordinary question and I couldn't remember the last time anyone asked me something ordinary without an agenda. It pays the bills, I said. There. A clean wall. He didn't flinch. That's honest. Silence settled between us. Not awkward, but present. Like a pause you could either fill with something real or use as an excuse to retreat. I checked my phone, not because I needed to, because it gave me something to hide behind. I could feel his eyes on me, not judging, not demanding, just waiting, as if he understood that some people needed time to come out from behind their armor. That only made me more determined not to. I looked up. So what about you? He answered without hesitation. I work with people. Mostly. That was vague. I waited for him to elaborate, but he didn't rush. He just added, it's the kind of job where you don't always get thanked, but you learn a lot. I frowned slightly. About what? He held my gaze. About what people carry when they think no one's paying attention. The words were calm, almost casual, but something about them brushed against my nerves in a way I didn't like. They sounded too accurate, like he was talking about me without saying my name. I leaned back a little. That's interesting. He smiled faintly, like he wasn't trying to impress me with the answer. It can be. The barista walked over and asked if Ethan wanted anything. He ordered a plain coffee, thanked her, and returned his attention to me. The barista smiled at him like she'd seen him before. Not a flirtatious smile, a familiar one. I noticed it immediately. I hated that I noticed, because noticing meant caring, and caring meant I was letting the night matter. I took another sip, then set my cup down more sharply than necessary. So why are you on the app? He blinked, surprised by the directness, then answered simply, because I got tired of waiting for life to happen. Something about that line irritated me, too. Maybe because it sounded like something I would say in private, when I was being honest with myself. I shrugged. That's one way to put it. He studied me for a second, not in a creepy way, more like he was listening to everything I wasn't saying. And I could have given him the truth. Because I'm lonely, because my friends are worried about me, because I keep waking up and realizing I'm building a life that looks fine on the outside but feels empty inside. Instead, I gave him the version that kept me safe. Jenna made me, I said. She thinks I need to get back out there. Ethan nodded slowly. Do you want to? The question landed too close to my ribs. I forced a small smile. It's just coffee. It's not that serious. He didn't argue. Okay. And that was it. No push. No persuasion. No, come on. Tell me the real reason. Just acceptance. I expected to feel relieved. Instead, I felt exposed. Because when someone doesn't fight you, you lose the excuse to keep fighting them. The conversation continued in fragments. Safe topics, small answers. The weather, the city, the cafe cinnamon smell. Nothing dangerous. Nothing that could break me open. But underneath it all, I felt something building. Not romance. Pressure. Like the longer I sat there, the more I had to face the possibility that Ethan wasn't the problem. That the coldness at the table might be coming from me. I glanced toward the door again. A couple walked in laughing, shaking rain from their coats. Somewhere behind me, someone's spoon clinked against a ceramic cup. Life kept moving in soft, ordinary ways. And I realized I was already planning my exit. 10 more minutes, I told myself. Then I could leave politely and return to my quiet apartment where nothing surprised me and nothing disappointed me either. I checked my phone again, pretending to read something. Then I looked up, and Ethan was watching me. Not with anger, not with need, with something quieter. Like he already knew exactly what I was about to do, and he wasn't going to stop me. My stomach tightened. I didn't know why that bothered me so much, but I suddenly wanted to prove something to him, or to myself, I wasn't sure. I set my phone face down. Tell me the real version, I said, surprising even myself. He raised an eyebrow. The real version of what? Why you're here, I said. Not the polite answer. For the first time, his expression shifted. The calm surface moved slightly, revealing something beneath it. Something careful. He leaned forward just a little. You want honesty? I nodded once. He held my gaze for a long second, then said, softly, yes. And the way he said it, simple, steady, without drama, made the air around our table feel different. Not louder, quieter, as if the cafe around us faded back, and a door I hadn't meant to open was starting to crack. I swallowed, suddenly aware that I might be standing at the edge of something I didn't control. And I hated that, but I stayed. For a moment after he said yes, I didn't speak. I told myself it was because I was letting him answer. The truth was, I didn't like how quiet I suddenly felt inside, like someone had turned down the volume on my usual defenses and left me with nothing but the raw sound of my own thoughts. Ethan didn't rush to fill the space. He just sat there, hands loosely folded near his coffee, watching me the way people watch a door they're not sure they should open. Outside, the rain slid down the window in thin silver lines. Inside, the cafe's noise continued. Voices, clinking cups, the soft hiss of the espresso machine. But at our table, the air felt oddly controlled, like we were both holding our breath in different ways. I cleared my throat. Okay, I said. So, he gave a small, almost amused smile. So the honest version? Yeah, I said, a little too sharp. The real one? He nodded once, like he was deciding how to tell the truth without making it sound heavy. I'm here because I wanted to meet someone who wouldn't try to sell me a perfect version of themselves. That wasn't what I expected. I waited for the follow-up. The line about how he'd been burned before, or how he was tired of games. People love those speeches on first dates, like they were auditioning for sincerity. But Ethan stopped there. I narrowed my eyes. And how would you know I wouldn't? I didn't, he said simply. I just hoped. The answer was so calm it made my irritation flare. Hope was a word I didn't trust. Hope always came with a bill you had to pay later. I took a sip of coffee and let the bitterness ground me. That's optimistic. Maybe, he said. Or maybe it's practical. I let out a short laugh that didn't quite reach my chest. Hope is practical? He shrugged. Depends on what you're hoping for. I studied him, trying to find the angle. People always had an angle. Even the quiet ones. Especially the quiet ones. His face didn't give much away. He wasn't trying to charm me. He wasn't trying to impress me. There was no performative confidence, no forced warmth. Just steadiness. That should have been comforting. Instead, it made me feel like the usual rules didn't apply. So what are you hoping for? I asked. He looked at me for a beat longer than necessary, as if measuring how much I could handle. Then he said, a conversation that doesn't feel like a transaction. The words landed uncomfortably close. I leaned back, crossing one leg over the other. Most dates are kind of transactional. Exactly, he said. People show up with a checklist, a role they want someone to play for them. They're not really looking at the person in front of them. My jaw tightened slightly, because I was looking at him, just not in the way he meant. I was scanning for risk, for disappointment, for any sign that letting him in would cost me something. I glanced down at his hands. No ring, nails clean. He'd clearly come straight from somewhere. His jacket was damp, and the edges of his hair were still darkened by rain. He smelled like soap and cold air, not cologne. Normal, and somehow that made me more suspicious. I forced my voice lighter. So you're saying you're not here to impress me? He smiled faintly. I'm here to be myself. I almost rolled my eyes. Not because it was a bad answer, but because it was the kind of answer that should be safe. And I didn't know what to do with safe anymore. The barista passed by again, carrying a tray of pastries. She glanced at Ethan and gave him the same familiar smile as before. Hey, she said like she knew him. You made it. Ethan returned the smile politely. Yeah, busy week. Tell me about it, she said. Then she looked at me, friendly but curious. Do you want anything? We've got fresh cinnamon rolls. No, I said too quickly. The barista nodded and moved on. I watched her walk away, then looked back at Ethan. You come here a lot. He lifted his cup. Enough. That barista knows you. He didn't deny it. She's nice. I felt my shoulders tighten. I didn't like invisible context. I didn't like walking into something where other people had already decided what kind of person someone was. It made me feel unprepared. So, I said, what exactly do you do? You said you work with people. I do, he said. And he didn't hesitate, but he also didn't give me the neat label I wanted. It's hard to summarize without it sounding like a speech. That's usually a sign it's something you want people to admire. I said before I could stop myself. His eyes flicked to mine, and for the first time, I saw something like a quiet warning. Not anger, not offense, just boundaries. I don't need admiration, he said calmly. I need purpose. The words were gentle, but they landed with weight. My throat went tight. I didn't like the way he said it, like he meant it, like he'd earned it. I looked away, pretending to be interested in the rain. Fine, I said. Purpose. He took a slow sip of coffee. I work with a local program, mostly adults, sometimes teenagers, people who are trying to rebuild their lives. That was still vague, but it was clearer. And something in me, annoying and curious, softened just a fraction. You're a counselor? I asked. Not exactly. A social worker? Sometimes, he said with a small smile. But I'm not licensed as one. I frowned. So what are you then? He set his cup down. Someone who shows up. I stared at him. That answer should have sounded cheesy. It should have made me cringe. But the way he said it, steady, unembarrassed, made it hard to dismiss. Like he wasn't trying to sound noble. Like he was just stating a fact. I swallowed. That's vague. He nodded. It is, but it's the truth. I felt heat rise behind my ribs, the old irritation that showed up whenever someone made me feel like my way of living was smaller, safer, less meaningful. Okay, I said. And how's that working out for you? His gaze didn't move. Some days it's exhausting, he admitted. Some days it's the only thing that makes sense. The cafe's noise seemed to dip for a second, like my brain had decided to listen more closely. I cleared my throat again, uncomfortable with the direction this was taking. So you're basically a hero. He let out a short breath, almost a laugh. No, that's what it sounds like. It sounds like that because people like simple stories, he said. But real life isn't simple. My fingers tightened around my cup. You're right about that. The words came out sharper than I meant them to. Ethan noticed. Of course he did. He looked at me carefully, like he was trying to understand whether I was just guarded or actively pushing him away. I didn't want him to understand. Understanding was dangerous. I checked my phone again, even though I'd promised myself I wouldn't, and that was when I saw the time. 7:29. I'd been here long enough. I could end it soon politely. I could smile, say I had an early morning and leave. I could go back to my apartment, take off my coat, and feel that familiar relief of being alone with my own quiet rules. But something about Ethan's calm presence made it hard to stand up without feeling like I was proving his point. I set my phone down again a little too firmly. Let's be honest, I said. He tilted his head. Okay, I don't think this is going to work, I said, keeping my tone flat. I expected him to look disappointed, to argue, to ask why, to try to salvage it. Instead, he just nodded once, as if he'd been expecting that sentence from the moment he walked in. All right, he said softly, and that simple response, no pleading, no anger, hit me in a place I didn't like, because it made me feel like I was the predictable one. I pressed my lips together. You're not even going to ask why? He held my gaze, calm as ever. Do you want me to? I didn't know how to answer that. My chest felt tight again. The cafe's warmth suddenly felt too close, too crowded, like the air was thick with things I didn't want to name. I pushed my chair back slightly. I should go, I said. Ethan didn't move. He didn't reach for me. He didn't call my name. He only said quietly, okay. I stood up, and as I slipped my coat more tightly around my shoulders, the familiar urge to disappear surged through me like relief. I reached for my bag. I didn't look at him, because if I looked at him, I might see something human, and if I saw something human, I might hesitate. And I didn't want to hesitate. Not tonight. The moment I stood up, my body felt lighter. That was always the pattern. Stay long enough to feel uncomfortable, then leave before anything could touch me. I slid my bag strap over my shoulder and kept my eyes on the edge of the table, not on Ethan's face. The cafe's warmth pressed against my skin, the air scented with coffee and cinnamon, and the soft music continued like nothing important was happening. People laughed near the counter. Someone stirred sugar into a cup. A chair scraped gently across the floor. Normal life. I told myself this was normal too. I should go, I repeated, more for myself than for him. Ethan didn't argue. He didn't ask me to stay. He didn't try to convince me that I was making a mistake. He just sat there with that calm, steady expression, like he'd already accepted the ending before the story even began. Okay, he said again. That word, okay, should have made this easy. Instead, it irritated me. It made me feel like I wasn't even important enough to fight for, and that thought sparked something sharp and childish inside me. I grabbed my coat from the back of the chair, slipping my arms into the sleeves too quickly. I could feel the damp chill from outside, waiting for me. I could almost taste the relief of the street. As I turned, my knee brushed the corner of the table. My cup wobbled slightly, and for a split second, I thought it would tip. I caught it before it spilled, my fingers tightening around the ceramic. Ethan reached forward at the same time, instinctive, careful, helping without making a big deal of it. Our hands almost touched. Almost. The cafe noise kept going. Cups clinked. Someone called out an order. The espresso machine hissed. And then, without warning, it was like the sound around me faded. Not literally. The cafe was still busy. But inside my head, something dropped. Like a curtain. Like my thoughts had stepped back and left only one sharp point of awareness. Ethan's voice, low and steady, behind me. Mia, he said. I froze. No one had called my name tonight with that tone. Not playful, not impatient, not casual. It wasn't flirtation. It wasn't even disappointment. It sounded like recognition. I hated that. I should have kept walking. I should have said don't or good night or something polite and empty. Instead, I stood there with my hand on my bag strap, my back half turned, like my body didn't know which direction it belonged to. Ethan didn't raise his voice. He didn't try to get the whole cafe to notice. He spoke softly, as if the words were meant for only one person. Do you still do it? He asked. I turned my head slightly, frowning. Do what? There was a pause, and in it, the silence in my chest spread wider. I felt the sharp edge of instinct, the same one that always told me to run when something got too close to the truth. Ethan's chair creaked faintly as he shifted. Do you still count the steps? He asked. My breath caught. For a second, I didn't understand what I'd heard. My brain tried to dismiss it, tried to label a coincidence, tried to twist it into something harmless. But my skin didn't believe in coincidences. My fingers went cold around the strap of my bag. What? I said, too quietly. He didn't repeat himself right away. He just watched me, the way you watch someone who is about to drop something fragile. The steps, he said softly. When you're nervous, you used to count them under your breath. 1 to 10, over and over, like it could keep you from falling apart. My throat tightened so fast it hurt. That wasn't something you could guess from a profile picture. That wasn't something Jenna could have told him. Nobody knew that. Not now. Not anymore. My heart began to pound. Not with fear exactly, but with the sudden sensation of being seen through the walls I'd spent years building. I forced a laugh that sounded wrong in my own ears. That's creepy. Ethan's expression didn't change. If anything, it softened, just slightly, like he'd expected me to react that way. I know how it sounds, he said. I'm not trying to scare you. I took a step back, creating distance. How do you know that? Ethan's gaze held mine, steady and unhurried. Because I remember it. My mouth went dry. I searched his face, trying to find the part of him that would reveal the trick. The lie, the manipulation, some smug satisfaction. There was none. Just calm, just something quiet and careful. Like he was holding a story he wasn't sure he had the right to tell. The cafe suddenly felt too bright, too open, like every person around us might turn and see my panic. I gripped my bag tighter. We've never met. Ethan didn't argue. He just said, not like this. My stomach dropped. I stared at him, and the longer I stared, the more I noticed small details I'd ignored before. The shape of his jaw when he spoke, the stillness of his posture, the way his eyes didn't bounce around searching for my reaction. There was something familiar there. Not in a romantic way. Not in the way you recognize someone you've wanted. In the way you recognize a place you once lived in and try not to think about. I shook my head, trying to force reality back into place. This is weird. Ethan nodded, slow. It is. Then explain it. I snapped. He didn't look offended. He didn't push back. He only leaned forward slightly, voice still calm. I can, he said, but not standing up like you're about to run. The words hit like a mirror. I hated mirrors. I glanced toward the door. I could leave. I could walk out into the rain and let the night dissolve into a story I told myself later. He was strange. I left. End of it. But my body didn't move. Because the silence inside me was louder than the cafe now. Because a part of me, the part one pretended didn't exist, was desperate to know how he had reached into a secret place I hadn't opened for anyone in years. I lowered my bag strap off my shoulder slowly, like my arms belonged to someone else. My chair scraped as I sat down again. Ethan didn't smile like he'd won. He didn't look relieved. He just nodded once, as if this was the only outcome that made sense. I kept my voice low. You have 1 minute, I said, trying to regain control. Ethan looked at me with that quiet attention again. Then he said something that made my stomach twist tighter than before. You used to sit at the back table in the library, he said softly, the one under the cracked window, and you always pretended you weren't cold. My chest went completely still. The cafe around us kept moving, but at our table, everything went quiet. I stared at him as if he'd just reached into a locked room in my mind. The back table, I repeated, my voice thin. Ethan didn't look pleased with himself. If anything, he looked careful, like he'd stepped onto fragile ground. Who are you? I asked. He exhaled. If I answer that too fast, you'll run. I hated that he was right. I'm not afraid of you, I said, even as my fingers tightened around my bag strap. I'm not trying to scare you, he replied. I just needed you to stay long enough to listen. Anger sparked in my chest. So you set this up? You got Jenna too? No. He cut in, gentle but firm. Jenna doesn't know this part. My stomach dipped. This part. Ethan slipped a hand into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small folded paper. He placed it on the table between us and slid it forward with 2 fingers, slow and respectful. I didn't touch it at first. What is that? I asked. A note, he said, from a long time ago. I don't write notes. You did, he said softly. Once. The cafe around us kept moving, cups clinking, someone laughing near the counter. But my world narrowed to the paper. The memory he'd named was too exact. The cracked window. The cold I pretended not to feel. No one could guess that. I unfolded the note. The handwriting was messy, teenage, and rushed. Just a few lines. And the moment I read it, my throat tightened so hard it hurt. Because I recognized the voice. It was mine. A version of me I tried to erase. A flash of a library smell, dusty pages, wet coats, old carpet. Hit me so clearly I almost looked around for bookshelves. One line stared back at me. If you're cold, take my seat. I won't tell anyone. I didn't remember writing it, but I remembered feeling it. My fingers trembled. Where did you get this? Ethan's eyes stayed on mine. You gave it to me. I let out a sharp breath, half laugh, half disbelief. I don't even remember you. I know, he said without offense. You were surviving. Rain traced the window in silver streaks. The cafe's warmth suddenly felt too close, like I couldn't get enough air. Under the table, my foot tapped. 1, 2, 3, counting without meaning to. I pushed the note back toward him. Why keep it? He paused, then answered quietly. Because it was the first time someone looked at me like I mattered. The words hit harder than I expected. I wanted to dismiss them, to tell him he was being dramatic. But the note was real in my hands. And so was the restraint in his voice. Like he'd rehearsed this in his head for years, only to keep it gentle now. I swallowed. So you recognize me from an app photo? Your eyes, he said. They haven't changed. You still look like you're bracing for impact. I flinched and he noticed. He didn't press. He only added, I'm not here for revenge, Mia. 2 minutes. That's all. Then what? My voice came out sharper than I meant. He glanced down at the note, then back up. Because I saw your name and thought, maybe you deserve to know you weren't invisible back then. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The cafe noise blurred at the edges, as if the world was giving us a narrow pocket of quiet. I forced the question out. What's your real name? He answered simply, like it wasn't a trick. Ethan, he said. It was always Ethan. And the way he said it made my skin go cold. Because the name didn't feel new. It felt like something I'd buried, and tonight, it had found its way back. The note sat between us like a small paper bridge across a gap I didn't want to cross. I stared at my own handwriting until the letters began to blur. For a second, I could almost hear the library again, the soft thud of books closing, the squeak of a chair, the quiet pressure of trying not to take up too much space. I don't remember, I admitted, and the words tasted like failure. Ethan nodded as if he'd expected that. You don't have to. Not all at once. That patience should have felt kind. Instead, it made something in me ache. Because the truth was, I did remember parts, just not in a clean, chronological way. My past didn't come back as a story. It came back as flashes. The sting of cold air, the weight of a backpack, the feeling of being watched and judged before I'd even spoken. I swallowed and glanced away. How old were we? 16, he said. Maybe 17. My chest tightened. That age had sharp edges. It was the part of my life I never described, even to friends, even to Jenna. I tried to steady my voice. And you were at the library because... Ethan's eyes softened slightly. Because it was warm. Because it was quiet. Because no one asked questions. My throat went dry. That answer felt too familiar. I looked down at the note again, then forced myself to pick it up. The paper was worn at the folds, like it had been opened and closed too many times. You kept this, I said, almost accusing. I did, he replied. I didn't have much back then. I wanted to say something sharp, something that would push the moment away, but the cafe felt different now, as if the table had shifted from a date to something else, something heavier, older. I drew in a slow breath. I used to go there after school, I said. The library. Ethan nodded, letting me speak. I stared at the rain on the window, and suddenly my mind opened a door I hadn't meant to touch. I saw myself at 16, hair pulled back, sleeves too long, pretending I wasn't hungry, pretending I wasn't scared, pretending I didn't notice the whispers from girls who had softer lives and louder confidence. I remembered the cracked window Ethan mentioned, the one that let cold air slip in even when the building was warm. I remembered choosing the back table because it was out of sight, and I remembered counting my steps, not because I liked numbers, but because it gave me something to control when everything else felt unstable. 1 to 10, 1 to 10, 1 to 10. My fingers curled against the edge of the table. I wasn't nice, I said quietly, surprising myself with the honesty. Not to anyone. Ethan didn't disagree. He just watched me. I was defensive, I added. All the time. You were surviving, he said again. The word landed like a gentle hand on a bruise. I shook my head slightly. People say that like it excuses everything. It doesn't, Ethan said. It explains it. Silence. I hated how my eyes stung. So I blinked hard and forced my voice steady. So what happened? Back then, what did I do that made you keep a note for 10 years? Ethan hesitated, like he was choosing the version of the story that wouldn't shame me. You didn't do something big, he said. That's the thing. I frowned. Then what? He leaned forward a little. You noticed. My chest tightened again. Ethan's voice stayed low. Everyone else looked through me. Teachers, students, even the people who were nice. They were nice in a way that made you feel smaller. I stared at him, unable to look away now. And you, he continued. You were sitting there shivering and pretending you weren't. And you slid me that note without making a scene. Like you understood the rules. The cafe's sound faded at the edges again. I could almost see it. A girl with too much armor, a boy with too little, and a piece of paper passed like a secret. I swallowed. I don't remember that. Ethan nodded. I know. But you do. I whispered. Yes, he said simply. I do. My hands trembled, and I set the note down before he could see it. I forced a breath in, then out. I didn't come here to dig up my teenage self, I said, trying to regain control. Ethan's gaze stayed steady. I didn't come here to punish you with it. Then why? I demanded, softer than before, but just as urgent. He paused. then answered with careful honesty. Because when you stood up to leave, he said, you looked exactly the same as you did back then, like you were about to disappear before anyone could matter. My stomach twisted. I opened my mouth to argue, but nothing came out. Because it was true. And for the first time that night, I couldn't tell whether I wanted to run or stay and find out who I used to be. My instinct was to defend myself, to say something sharp, something clever, something that would put the distance back where it belonged. But the words wouldn't form. They got stuck behind a tightness in my throat that felt embarrassingly close to emotion. I hated that. I reached for my coffee, even though it was already cold, and took a sip just to have something to do. The bitterness didn't help. It only made me more aware of how exposed I felt sitting across from someone who held a piece of my past like it mattered. I don't even know you, I said finally. Ethan nodded. You're right. That's what makes this strange. It is strange, he agreed, but it doesn't have to be unsafe. The word unsafe made my stomach tighten. I didn't like how easily he used it, as if he'd seen that word printed on the inside of my ribs. I set my cup down carefully. So what do you want from me? Ethan looked at the note once, then back at me. Nothing that you don't choose to give. That answer made me suspicious. People say that, I muttered, and then they take anyway. Ethan didn't flinch at my tone. He just spoke softly. I'm not here to take anything from you, Mia. My jaw clenched. Then why bring this up? Why now? He hesitated, not because he didn't know the answer, but because he did and it mattered. I saw your name, he said, on the app, and I thought maybe you'd forget what you did. I stiffened. I didn't do anything terrible. I know, he said quickly. That's not what I meant. I narrowed my eyes, waiting. He continued, voice careful. I thought maybe you'd forget that you once had a softer side. The part of you that noticed. The part that could be kind without making it performative. My chest felt tight again, and I hated how much that sentence affected me. You're romanticizing a note, I said, trying to dismiss it. Ethan shook his head slowly. I'm respecting it. The difference mattered. I felt it. I looked away, staring at the rain on the window, as if it could offer me a script. Outside, people walked quickly under umbrellas, avoiding puddles, avoiding discomfort just like me. I forced myself to ask the question that kept circling my mind. Did you come here to get even? I asked. Ethan's eyebrows lifted slightly. No. The answer was immediate. Certain. I studied his face, looking for the satisfaction of someone who'd planned a reveal. I found none. If anything, I found restraint. Like he'd waited a long time to say these things, and now that he finally could, he was trying not to hurt me with them. That would be pointless, he added. Why? I asked. He leaned back slightly, hands open on the table. Because revenge doesn't give you your life back, he said. It just ties you to the moment you're trying to escape. My throat tightened. I didn't know if he meant himself or me. I swallowed. You talk like someone who's thought about that. Ethan's gaze dropped for a second, then returned. I have. A quiet passed between us. The cafe seemed to dim at the edges again, like the world was letting us have this pocket of honesty. I forced my voice to stay sharp. So what are you doing here then? Ethan's expression softened. Closure, he said. Maybe. Closure for what? I demanded. He took a breath. For that version of me, he said. The one who needed proof that being invisible wasn't permanent. I felt something twist in my stomach. An old, familiar guilt. I didn't make you invisible, I said quickly. No, Ethan said gentle. You didn't. You did the opposite. That's why I kept the note. I blinked, confused. He continued, voice quiet. But when you stood up tonight, it looked like you were about to disappear in the same way I used to. And I thought, maybe you deserved to hear the truth before you did. I stared at him, my mind racing to find an escape route that didn't involve admitting he might be right. You don't know my life, I said. I don't, he agreed. But I can see what you're doing. My fingers curled against my palm. And what am I doing? Ethan didn't answer with judgment. He answered with certainty. You're leaving first, he said, so you don't have to feel left. The words landed like a quiet, soft but direct. I froze. For a moment, I couldn't breathe properly. I wanted to say he was wrong. I wanted to laugh it off. I wanted to stand up again and prove I still had control. But my body didn't move, because deep down, I knew he named it perfectly. The cafe's noise returned, sharp at the edges, someone laughing, a spoon tapping a cup. But my mind stayed locked on a sentence. Leaving first, so you don't have to feel left. I swallowed hard. That's not why. Ethan didn't argue. He only said, softly, then tell me why. The question was simple and terrifying. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. I hated that my silence gave him power. Not because Ethan was trying to control me, he wasn't, but because the truth was sitting right behind my teeth, and I couldn't swallow it back down without choking on it. I looked at my hands on the table. My fingers were tense, curled slightly, as if they were gripping something invisible. I don't know, I said finally. Ethan nodded once, as if that answer was enough for now. Okay, that calm acceptance again. It should have annoyed me. Instead, it made me feel safer, and that scared me more than annoyance ever could. I forced my voice into something steadier. You still haven't explained why you swiped on me? I said. Or why you showed up. Ethan's eyes stayed on mine. You want the honest answer? I asked for it, I said. So yes. He took a slow breath, then spoke carefully. Because I recognized you. My stomach tightened. From a library? From your face, he corrected. From your name. From the way you wrote your bio like you were trying to sound casual, while actually warning people not to get close. Heat rose in my chest. That's not what I was doing. He didn't argue. He only said, it's what it felt like. I pressed my lips together. So you recognized me and thought, what, this will be fun? No, he said quietly. I thought it was unfinished. The word struck a nerve. Unfinished. I repeated, skeptical. Ethan nodded. Not romance. Not a fantasy. Just something I carried. I stared at him, waiting. He continued, voice low. Back then, I never got to say thank you. My throat went tight. For a note. For being human, he said simply. The cafe felt warmer all of a sudden, like the air had thickened. I shifted in my chair, trying to find a position that didn't feel so exposed. You could have messaged me, I said. If you recognized me, you didn't have to do this. I didn't want to trap you in a conversation online, Ethan replied. Online, people can disappear too easily. They can perform. They can pretend. And in person, they can what? I asked. He held my gaze. In person, you can feel what's real. I hated how much sense that made. I glanced toward the counter, desperate for something ordinary to break the tension. The barista was wiping down the espresso machine. She glanced over again, and this time I caught it. She wasn't just being friendly. She was checking on Ethan like she cared. I turned back to him. You really come here a lot. Ethan's mouth lifted slightly. Yeah. Why? He hesitated, then answered honestly. Because it's close to where I volunteer. Volunteer? I repeated. With the program? He nodded. 2 blocks from here. My brain tried to fit that into a box I could understand. So you came from there tonight? Yes, he said. I left late. The barista walked over with a small plate and set it down between us. 2 wrapped biscotti. On the house, she said, smiling at Ethan. Then she looked at me, softer. They're good. Trust me. Thank you, I said automatically. She nodded, then leaned toward Ethan, lowering her voice like she didn't want to embarrass him. You okay? Ethan's answer was quiet and steady. I'm fine. She gave him a look that said she didn't fully believe it, then walked away. I stared after her. She worries about you. Ethan's gaze flicked to the plate, then back to me. She sees a lot, he said. More than people think. That sentence made my skin prickle, because it sounded like the way he described his own work. I picked up 1 biscotti and turned it in my fingers without eating it. So this is your life, I said slowly. Helping people, showing up, getting recognized by baristas. Ethan smiled faintly. It's not glamorous. I didn't say it was, I replied. The truth was, I didn't know what to do with someone like him. Someone who wasn't trying to win me, but also wasn't afraid of me. Someone who could sit through my coldness without reacting like it was a personal insult. I set the biscotti down again untouched. Why did you think I'd even remember you? I asked quieter. Ethan's eyes softened. I didn't, he admitted. I hoped you might remember the feeling. What feeling? He paused. The feeling of someone seeing you, he said, without demanding anything from you. My throat tightened, because that was what the note had been, wasn't it? Not a big gesture, not a speech, just a quiet offering. If you're cold, take my seat. I swallowed and tried to sound normal. So you match with me for closure. For truth, Ethan corrected. Closure comes after. I stared at him. And what truth do you want? His voice dropped even lower. Whether you're still the kind of person who notices, he said, or whether you've buried her completely. I felt my chest tighten again, a slow pressure that pushed against my ribs. I didn't answer, because I didn't know. And the worst part was a small, secret part of me didn't want to be the girl who buried her. Not anymore. I didn't like the way the question lingered between us. Have you buried her completely? It sounded like an accusation. Even though Ethan's tone hadn't been accusing, it sounded like a challenge, even though he wasn't trying to win. And it made me feel something I hadn't felt in a long time on a date. Not attraction, not excitement, responsibility. I glanced down at the biscotti again, then finally broke one in half and took a small bite. It was sweeter than I expected, crisp and warm with cinnamon, a normal taste in the middle of an abnormal conversation. Ethan watched me with that quiet patience. I swallowed. You're asking me to prove something. No, he said gently. I'm asking you to look. I let out a tight breath. At what? At yourself, he replied. The words hit too close, and my instincts rose again, sharp and familiar. My body wanted to stand up, to leave, to put the night back into the category of things that didn't touch me. But I stayed, not because I suddenly trusted him, because for the first time, leaving felt like losing something I couldn't name. I set the biscotti down. Okay, I said. If you want honesty. Ethan nodded once. My default is to assume it won't work, I admitted. Not because people are bad, because I don't want to feel stupid for hoping. He didn't smile. He didn't soften it with a joke. He just listened. And I know, I continued, voice steady but quiet, that I've gotten good at ending things before they can end me. Ethan's gaze held mine. That's what I saw. I swallowed. My throat was tight again, but I refused to let my voice shake. So what now? You got your truth. Ethan paused. Not yet, he said. I blinked. What do you mean, not yet? He leaned back slightly. I didn't come to collect a confession, he said. I came to see if he could stay in the room when it gets uncomfortable. I stared at him, annoyed and unsettled, because he was right. Staying was the hardest part. I pushed my chair back a few inches, then stopped. My hands hovered near my bag, like they wanted permission. Ethan didn't move. He didn't reach for me, didn't try to anchor me. He let me choose. The cafe suddenly felt smaller, as if the walls had crept closer while we talked. The noise around us kept going, but it felt far away, like we were in a bubble of something fragile. I don't like being cornered, I said. I'm not cornering you, Ethan replied. You're cornering yourself. I held his gaze, my heart beat loud in my ears. Then, before I could overthink it, I said the first real thing that rose to the surface. I'm embarrassed, I admitted. His expression softened slightly. About what? About how I acted, I said. The phone, the attitude, the way I stood up like you were nothing. Ethan didn't rush to comfort me. He didn't say it's fine. He didn't erase it. He just said quietly, thank you for saying that. The sincerity in his voice made my eyes sting again. I blinked hard and looked down at the table. I didn't expect this, I muttered. I didn't expect you to sit back down, Ethan said. I let out a short breath that sounded almost like a laugh. Don't make it sound like I did something heroic. Ethan's mouth lifted faintly. It wasn't heroic. It was brave. I hated that word, because brave was what people called you when you were about to do something that could hurt. I glanced at the window, at the rain streaking down the glass. So, I said, forcing a normal tone, what's your plan now? Therapy over coffee? Ethan's smile grew slightly, just for a second. No. Then what? He looked around the cafe, then back at me. A second first date, he said. I frowned. That sounds like a line. It's not. he replied. We can reset. Pretend the first 20 minutes didn't happen. I stared at him. You want to pretend I didn't reject you? I want to pretend you didn't have to, he said calmly, because something else was happening under it. My chest tightened. I didn't know what to do with that kind of grace. I wasn't used to people offering me a reset without demanding a price. I took a slow breath. And how do you do a second first date? Ethan glanced at my cup. Start with a simple question, he said. One you answer honestly. I hesitated. Okay. He leaned forward slightly, voice quiet. What do you really want, Mia? The question landed softly, but it shook something deep. I opened my mouth, then closed it again, because the honest answer wasn't neat. It wasn't impressive. It was the kind of answer you only said when you stopped performing. Finally, I whispered it. I want to stop feeling like I have to run, I said. Ethan didn't move. He didn't celebrate the moment. He just nodded, as if that was the beginning of something real. Outside, the rain eased, and the streetlights steadied into clearer shapes. Inside, for the first time since he sat down, the air at our table didn't feel like a test. It felt like possibility, not a fairy tale, just a door that hadn't fully closed yet. For a few minutes, it felt normal. Not sparks, not a movie moment, just two people talking while the rain eased outside, and the cafe lights softened everything. Ethan asked what I liked when no one was trying to impress anyone. Old movies, I said. The slow ones. He smiled. Good taste. And you? I asked. Fixing people's days, he said. Even small parts. I should have dismissed it. Instead, I believed him, and that was when my brain did what it always did when something felt warm. It searched for the hook. My eyes drifted to a bulletin board near the counter. Flyers layered over each other. Community events, tutoring a winter drive. One sheet had a name printed at the bottom. Jenna. My stomach tightened. I leaned forward, reading again to be sure. Contact Jenna R. I looked back at Ethan, keeping my voice light on purpose. You said you volunteer nearby. I do, he replied. With the community center. He nodded. Does Jenna volunteer there too? I asked. The pause was small, but it was real. Sometimes, he said. Something cold slid through me. I set my cup down carefully. How long have you known her? A few months, he answered. My pulse picked up. And you recognized me on the app? Yes. I stared at him. So this wasn't random. Ethan didn't argue. Not completely. The warmth at our table cracked. I felt it in my chest first, like a door closing. Tell me the truth, I said, quiet but sharp. Did you ask Jenna to set this up? He held my gaze. I told her I recognized you, he said, and I asked if she thought you'd meet me for coffee. My throat tightened. It wasn't dramatic. It was worse, simple. So you did, I whispered. Ethan leaned forward slightly. Mia, I didn't want to corner you. I wanted one honest conversation before you disappeared again. The sentence landed hard, because he'd used my pattern against me. Under the table, my foot tapped once, then again, counting without permission. 1, 2, 3. My hands went to my bag. You should have told me. I was afraid you'd leave before you heard anything, he admitted. I stood up, slower than before. But the instinct was the same. Distance, air, control. The cafe noise sharpened around us. Suddenly too loud. Ethan stayed seated. He didn't reach for me. That should have been a relief. It wasn't. I don't like being arranged, I said. I don't like people deciding what I need. I understand, he said. I'm sorry. I stared at him, waiting for the part where he defended himself, where he tried to win. He didn't. He only said, I won't follow you. That sentence hit me in a place I didn't expect, because a small part of me wanted him to break his calm, to prove I mattered enough to chase. I grabbed my coat and turned toward the door. Behind me, Ethan stood, but he didn't come closer. I heard the soft slide of paper on wood. His voice stayed low, careful. If you want the rest of the truth without feeling trapped, he said. Read that later. I didn't turn around. I walked out into the cool night air. Rain now only a mist. My steps were fast, almost automatic, like my body knew this route by heart. Leaving first so I wouldn't have to feel left. But halfway down the sidewalk, my pace slowed. My throat burned with words I refused to say, because for the first time, I couldn't tell whether I was protecting myself or repeating the same mistake in a cleaner outfit. Now, I didn't read the paper right away. I walked 3 blocks in the wrong direction just to keep moving, just to keep the cold air in my lungs so I wouldn't feel the heat rising behind my eyes. The city was damp and soft, lights smeared by mist. Cars hissed over wet pavement. A couple hurried past me, laughing under a shared umbrella, and I felt a sharp, irrational jealousy that surprised me, not because they were in love, because they weren't afraid to be seen. I stopped under the awning of a closed bakery and finally looked down at what I was holding. Somewhere between the cafe door and the sidewalk, I must have reached back and grabbed the paper without thinking. My hand had done it before my pride could stop me. The page was folded once. Not dramatic, not fancy, just a plain sheet. I unfolded it carefully, half expecting a long explanation that would make me roll my eyes. A speech, a plea, something designed to pull me back with guilt. There wasn't much, just a few lines written neatly. I didn't come to change your life. I came to return something you gave me. You don't owe me your time. You don't owe me your softness. But you do deserve to know you once had it. If you ever want to talk, without pressure, 2 blocks east, Community Center, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Always coffee. At the bottom, 1 final line smaller. You don't have to leave first anymore. I stared at that last sentence until my vision blurred slightly. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't a confession. It was worse because it was true, and because it didn't demand anything from me. I leaned my shoulder against the wall beneath the awning, letting the mist drift in, dampening the sleeve of my coat. My chest felt tight in a way I couldn't explain with logic. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to label him as manipulative and move on. But if I did that, I'd be lying to myself. Ethan hadn't chased me. He hadn't cornered me. He'd named my pattern. And then he'd respected my choice anyway. I took a slow breath and looked at the street in front of me. My feet were already turning, almost on their own, like my body had decided something my mind was still arguing with. I could go home. I could take a hot shower. I could tell Jenna the date was fine and never mention the note, the library, or the way my heart had reacted when he said my name. Or I could do the one thing I never did. I could go back, not to the cafe, not to him like a dramatic movie scene, back to the truth. 2 blocks east. The community center wasn't hard to find. The building was older, plain brick, with a simple sign and a row of windows glowing warmly from inside. It wasn't a romantic setting. It wasn't designed to impress anyone. It looked like a place where people came when life had gotten too heavy to carry alone. I stood across the street for a full minute, just watching. My hands were cold. My heart was loud. I counted my steps without meaning to. 1 to 10, 1 to 10, and then I stopped myself. You don't have to leave first anymore. I crossed. The door opened with a soft chime. Inside, the air smelled like old paper, coffee, and something faintly sweet, like someone had baked something earlier. A bulletin board near the entrance was crowded with flyers, tutoring, job workshops, support groups, community dinners. And there, taped near the center, was the same flyer I'd seen at the cafe, with Jenna's name as a contact. So that part was true. I exhaled slowly and stepped farther inside. A small table in the corner held a coffee pot and mismatched mugs. 2 people sat nearby talking quietly, heads bent together. A man in a hoodie carried a stack of chairs, as if he'd done it 100 times. No one looked at me like I didn't belong. No one looked at me at all. It was strangely comforting. Then I saw Ethan. He was standing near a shelf of donated books, speaking with an older woman who looked tired but relieved, like she'd just finished telling him something difficult. He wasn't dramatic with her. He wasn't overly gentle. He was just present, listening the way he had listened to me, like attention was a kind of respect. When the woman left, Ethan turned slightly as if he'd sensed me. His eyes met mine across the room. He didn't smile like he'd won. He didn't look surprised. He just looked steady. And for a second, I felt the old urge to turn around and vanish. But I didn't. I walked toward him. Each step felt too loud in my own head. But Ethan didn't move closer. He didn't rush to meet me halfway. He didn't make me feel like I had to perform an apology to earn my place in front of him. He simply waited. When I stopped in front of him, my voice came out quiet. I read it, I said, holding up the paper. Ethan nodded once. Okay. I swallowed. You were right about something, I admitted. His expression stayed calm. What's that? I hated how hard it was to say it out loud. That I leave first, I said. So I don't have to feel left. Ethan didn't respond with I told you so. He didn't respond with satisfaction. He only said gently, that's a hard way to live. My throat tightened. I forced my eyes to stay on his. I didn't come here because you won, I said, the word tasting bitter. And I didn't come here because Jenna arranged it. Ethan's gaze softened slightly. Why did you come? I took a slow breath. Because, I said, I don't want to be the kind of person who runs from the only honest moment in the room. He held my gaze for a long second, then nodded. That's honest. I let out a shaky breath I didn't mean to release. I'm sorry, I said quickly, before my pride could stop me, for how I treated you tonight. For the phone, the coldness, the way I stood up like you weren't real. Ethan didn't rush to comfort me. He didn't make my apology easy. He just watched me carefully, like he was listening for whether I meant it. I do, I added, voice quieter. I mean it. Ethan nodded slowly. Thank you. The simplicity of his reply almost broke me. My eyes stung, and I looked down for half a second, embarrassed. When I looked back up, Ethan's expression was still gentle, but there was something firmer in it now. Something I respected. I'm going to say something clearly, he said. I braced myself. I shouldn't have involved Jenna, he said. Even a little. That was my fear talking. I'm sorry. I blinked, caught off guard by the directness. You actually mean that? I do, he said. You deserve the choice without any influence. My chest loosened slightly. I didn't forgive him instantly. I didn't want to pretend everything was fine. But for the first time, it felt possible that two people could tell the truth without using it as a weapon. I glanced around the room. So you really do this, I said softly. Ethan followed my gaze. Yeah, he replied. This place helped me once. I stayed. I looked back at him. You stayed. He nodded. I stayed. The words echoed in my chest like a challenge and an invitation at the same time. I hesitated, then asked the question that mattered more than any romantic line. What do you want from me now? I asked. Ethan didn't answer quickly. He didn't romanticize it. Nothing, he said. Not tonight. I blinked. Nothing? He shook his head slightly. Tonight, I want you to leave here without feeling like you have to disappear, he said. That's all. A strange warmth rose behind my ribs. It wasn't infatuation. It wasn't a fantasy. It was relief. Because for once, the bar wasn't perfection. The bar was simply staying human. I glanced toward the coffee table in the corner. You said there's always coffee. Ethan's mouth lifted faintly. There is. I surprised myself by letting out a small, quiet laugh. Okay, I said. Then can we start with that? Ethan held my gaze, and something in his eyes softened. Something that looked like hope, but not the reckless kind. The careful kind. Yes, he said. We walked to the coffee pot together. He handed me a mug without making it a moment. I poured slowly, watching the dark stream fill the cup. My hands were steadier than they'd been all night. We stood there in silence for a second. But it wasn't the kind of silence that punishes you. It was the kind of silence that makes room. Ethan looked at me. Mia? Yeah. He didn't say anything dramatic. He didn't ask me to promise anything. He didn't try to rewrite the night into a perfect story. He only said softly, You don't have to be the girl who runs anymore. I swallowed, eyes stinging again, and managed a small nod. I'm not sure who I am yet, I admitted. Ethan's voice was quiet. Certain. That's okay, he said. Just don't disappear before you find out. Outside, the mist had finally started to lift. The streetlights looked sharper through the window, less blurred. The world hadn't changed, but something inside me had. For the first time in a long time, the quiet didn't feel like an ending. It felt like the beginning of a life I might actually stay for.